my name's Kirstie Simson, and I am an improviser. I teach internationally and perform. I still do. I was also teaching in the States at a university there for 13 years, but I came back in 2020 to live back in Wales. And I got involved with Chisenhale really because I was involved with X6. So I trained at the Laban Centre. And actually my first year we were still down in Addlestone. So the Laban Centre wasn't in London at that point. And Emlyn Clade came down to teach us ballet classes. And I was not a fan of, for some reason, I was not a fan of what would you call it? Ballet and modern and all that stuff. It just never spoke to me really, the formal nature of it. So when she came and taught, I kind of lit up because she taught in a very different, more experimental way. It was really interesting. From the get-go, I just took to experimental stuff, So then I think that was still at X6. Emlyn did a duet for myself and another woman that we performed at X6. So I was quite involved at X6 while I was still at Laban, actually. And then after I left Laban, I was also working there. So it just was kind of like natural that when X6 closed down and it moved to Chisenhale, really the focus moved there, that I also started doing stuff. I think by about 83, I left the country and I was living in Amsterdam and then in the States and different places. But I was always traveling, around. So that's why I came in and out of doing stuff at Chisenhale. But I remember I taught workshops there, and like I said, I think I taught some kind of slightly regular evening classes. That must have been early. I think it was before the fire escape issue was resolved. I was probably living in London right after Laban, when I left Laban.
What would you have been teaching at that time?
Well, I was teaching contact improvisation. I met Steve, when he first brought contact to England down at Dartington, which was around that time, just a bit before. It was my first year after Laban. I think I left Laban in 1980 or something like that. And I was in a contact. I did about 3 classes with him, and he said somebody has to teach this work in Europe, and I just put up my hand. So there were about 5 of us that volunteered at the beginning to teach contact. So I started teaching straight away. I mean, I hadn't a clue what I was doing, but yeah. And we created a little company and all of that. I don't think we ever performed at Chisenhale. I mean, for me, it was like very much because I had such a profound experience when I first encountered Steve's work, that changed my life really. So a lot of, I feel like my real work life in dance started at that moment. Although, when I left college, I was working with Rosemary Butcher for a year with her company, and that she had a pretty profound effect in a different kind of way. But it was really the catalyst of the contact improv and the improv thing that, when I encountered that, I had an experience where I realized that everything was already present within me, and it was about undoing, to discover what this meant. This, as a unique expression of the whole, if you like, you know what I mean? And that's that was the profound experience that I had that really shifted my whole relationship. Because before that, I thought I was going to have to become somebody. So from that moment, I said, okay, I'm an improviser. And that was it. That I stopped doing all kinds of anything, any set material of any description or choreography or anything. So, and I guess that's what I became known for in a way, because there were not many of us that gave ourselves completely and utterly to like improv.
Yeah.
So.
And so you were teaching and you were also performing at Chisenhale.
Yeah.
And was the teaching an important part of your practice and developing your performances as well? What was that relationship for you at that time?
Well, teaching's always been important to me. Number one, as a means of supporting myself. because I never wanted to actually apply for money for anything. I never wanted to have anybody deciding whether my work was worth anything or not. So I actually, from that point, early on when Steve asked that question, I took that on. So teaching really was the way that I developed my own everything, my own work, my own dancing, my own relationship to dance and life, and my practice really. And then my performances, of course, kind of were connected to that, I guess, because that was really my practice. So and I was an improviser, so my interest was to investigate improvisation in performance, which is what I did. I think when Julian and I worked together, we actually more set we created really quite intense structures, and we actually worked with set designs as well. So that was slightly different when we were working together, but I think we still used improvisation in the pieces. But a lot of the things that I did, like with David White, those kinds of things, they were all improvised.
Yeah. When you were at Chisenhale, were you also taking part in other classes that other people were teaching?
Some of the times I would participate in workshops at Chisenhale, especially the contact workshops. I seem to remember like Nancy Stark-Smith teaching there at some point, and I participated. In fact, there's a very lovely video of Emlyn and I doing a head-to-head contact. So I would take classes like that. I was never involved with the running of the place. Of course, I knew everybody there and all of that. So but
yeah, you mentioned that you were traveling between Amsterdam and the US. How did Chisenhale fit within that network that you had internationally? I mean, how did it fit within that network elsewhere in the world? Was it were the places similar that you were working in internationally, or?
Well, in a way, in a sense that I always worked on the fringes, if you see what I mean. I mean, I was never really interested in the dance world, really. I mean, I was affiliated with it in a sense, but I was always on the fringes, always interested in the innovative work and unusual stuff, and that's what I found at Chisenhale, and those were the places that I also worked in when I was, in America or in Amsterdam, or so in a way, yeah, it was kind of it was a bit of a global movement that was happening in a way, that had come really from Judson Church, from that era in the States, and that work that came over. So through Mary Fulkerson at Dartington, she brought Steve over, and then all the people like Simone Forti, and later on Nancy Stark-Smith, and all these people. But at that time, I mean, God, geez, we used to have like these critics used to come, and they were ballet critics to the performance stuff. They would slander us, like unbelievable, nasty, personal, insulting, And the only thing I could think was, well, there must be something to all this stuff. Otherwise, they wouldn't be having these kinds of strong reactions. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you had to kind of be fairly strong in a way, to keep going despite all of this, I mean, for me, I was just in love with it, with the especially with the improv, really. I was just so passionate about it as a life practice. It showed me how to live, and that's why I was interested in it. So yeah.
And what was it like being part of Chisenhale at that time?
It was always the people that came were always lovely. It was a lovely community, really, really lovely, supportive community. The place itself was often very cold. In the winters, it was slightly excruciating, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. But, in those days, I mean, I was young. We were all young. We that's what we were kind of used to. And we just used to get on with it. But I do remember that. And also the walk from the tube station and all of that, to actually get there, that was pretty you know, so you had to be kind of tough. But the actual place, you know, like I said, the community, the people that came to workshops and all that were just lovely, really lovely, beautiful, you know, and it's where a lot of this cutting edge, as far as I was concerned, research was happening that had so little to do with the mainstream, you know, dance. I mean, there was some crossovers. I think the community was also so lovely and supportive because we had to support each other because nobody else was supporting us. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think the focus of Chisenhale, I think it shifted over the years to much more of the community work. I think at that time, it was more, as I recall, was more focused on this kind of new material that was coming in from the States, and, you know, kind of slightly wacky performance stuff and all of that kind of thing, I think, as I recall. And then I think it got more, you know, more involved with the environment, with the local community and that kind of thing. But I think it was different at the very beginning.
And if you had to describe what Chisenhale was at that time, how would you describe it?
I would say that it was a kind of a hub, an exciting hub for people with like-minded interests, you know, in terms of I would call it cutting edge at the time, research into new directions for dance. You know, that's how I felt it to be, and therefore it was an exciting place to you know, whenever I went there, it felt really not exciting in kind of any kind of glossy terms like we would that you'd see more today, you know what I mean, but this really like really basic, bare but happening kind of space. But anyway, you know, really magical happenings, real magical performances that really, you know, had a huge impact on me as a young developing artist.
That excitement that you describe is interesting. It's kind of like a potential and also an energy, that realization of what you can do, and then having space to do it in as well, and you know, people trying out all sorts of different things and working across mediums.
That's right. I mean, you know, my sense is that, you know, the 60s and 70s, the whole revolution that happened in the States was really like something happened in consciousness. There was a kind of breakthrough in consciousness, and what we were experiencing was that, you know, the aftermath of that. And I do actually feel, interestingly, that this is a similar time in a very, very different way. I mean, this is a time because of crisis, you know what I mean? And I mean, I suppose at the time it might have felt like that because of the Vietnam War and all the rest of it, you know, but now it's like, because we're facing climate change and everything, I think it's another time where there's some sense, despite how dark it feels, that there's some potential on the flip side of it that's kind of like waiting. So, I mean, I've just written this thing for a book in the States, and one of the things I've talked about is, for me also, the importance of having safe spaces throughout my career. Really, really, really important for something in me to be able to like come, you know, emerge. And definitely like Dartington was that place, Chisenhale, you know, there's a few other places, but X6, and that, you know, there were safe spaces that were really, really important for generating kind of like new, you know, new work that had to do with consciousness. It wasn't just like, you know, in the mainstream dance, like making another dance kind of thing. You know what I mean? It wasn't that. And that stuff I was never at all interested in. Just didn't get it at all. But this thing of actually changing consciousness through the work. Places like X6 and Chisenhale, Dartington, and those kind of places. The school in Amsterdam, they've all been involved in that. You know, that shift. So.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me.
Yeah, you're welcome.